Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If there's one thing that I agree with my counterpart on the Democratic side of the aisle today, we certainly heard a historic speech. And I think when you hear a historic speech, you should probably put into a bit of a historical context. And to begin that process, I'd like to start with a quote from a former president of our country on budgeting and economic development. And I quote, "This administration intends to cut taxes in order to build the fundamental strength of our economy, to remove a serious barrier to long-term growth, to increase incentives by routing out inequalities and complexities, and to prevent an even greater budget deficit that a lagging economy would otherwise surely produce. Every dollar released from taxation that is spent or invested will help create a new job and a new salary. And these new jobs and new salaries can create other jobs and other salaries and more customers and more growth for an expanding American economy," end quote. Now, these are not the words of a conservative icon like Ronald Reagan. These are the words of former Democratic President John F. Kennedy in 1962. As we look at the historical perspective on this budget, bringing it down to the state level, I think when we evaluate spending and taxation, it's always helpful to put those numbers into context as well. For example, it took our Commonwealth 320 years, from 1963 to the year 2003, to take our budget from $0 to $20 billion. During the 8 years of the Rendell administration, he took our budget from a budget of $20 billion to $28 billion, a 40% increase in spending in 8 years alone. During the Corbett years, the Corbett administration took the budget from $28 billion to $29 billion, a 3.5% increase in spending. This budget, taken in totality, represents state spending going from $29 billion to $33.8 billion, a $4.75 billion increase in state spending, a 16.3% increase in growth in 1 year alone. Now, we are responsible not just for this year's budget, but also for projecting out to the future. If we were to take that rate of growth and project it out over a full 8 years of a Wolf administration, our state budget would go from $29 billion to $95 billion, a $66 billion increase in spending, a 227% increase in spending in 8 years alone. So we would go from 0 to 20 in 320 years, and in 20 years, we would go from 20 to $95 billion. Whether that is the right or wrong direction for the people of Pennsylvania, I believe those people will have their views heard over the next several months. Now, to the governor's credit, he is not taking the approach of smoke and mirrors with this budget. He is being intellectually honest with the budget proposal he's put forth. He's not taking the Rendell approach of using one-time federal stimulus dollars to the point of $7 billion and plugging it into operating expenses to make people feel like we have a balanced budget when we know that we do not. He is actually willing to delineate the $2.5 billion in new taxes he's willing to raise on working families across this Commonwealth to accomplish that goal. Now, as concerned as we are about the macro numbers, and I think the people of Pennsylvania will be concerned as well about a $5 billion spending increase and a $2.5 billion tax increase, I do think there are a lot of goals the governor presented today that we share. We want jobs that pay, we want schools that teach, and we want government that works. And we are fully willing to engage in a legitimate discussion on these public policy issues. We believe that jobs that pay can be accomplished through competitive tax rates. And we're glad that the governor has recognized the time has come for Pennsylvania to no longer have the highest taxes in the nation on job creators. We recognize a willingness to talk about ending corporate tax loopholes and ending corporate welfare. The conservative think tank, the Commonwealth Foundation, put over $700 million worth of corporate welfare spending in our state budget on the table to be evaluated for cuts. We believe in investing in infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, sewage, internet access for rural communities. We believe in training workers, but training them for jobs that actually exist when they end those programs. We want schools that teach, but schools that teach isn't just about adequacy of funding and more dollars. It's also about a real discussion on how we raise those dollars. The governor put forth a proposal on property tax reform. Our members support moving away from property tax as the primary funding mechanism for our public schools. We want to do it in a dollar-for-dollar manner, not we're going to save some of the money, we're going to spend some of the money, we're going to reduce taxes with some of the money. We want dollar-for-dollar property tax reductions for our homeowners across this Commonwealth. We want to talk about what is the fairest manner of distributing these funds. What is a fair and equitable funding formula? We want to address cost drivers for our public education system. And at the forefront is pension reform. We welcome the governor to the discussion of addressing our public pension system in this Commonwealth. He will find willing negotiators on that topic going forward within our caucus. And most importantly, as we evaluate the quantity of the dollars we spend on education, how to raise them, what is the right dollar amount, how to distribute them, how to curtail the needs for such increases. We want to focus on not just the quantity of those dollars, we want to talk about the quality of the product. We want to talk about how do we make our education system better so we're producing a better product with those dollars, producing graduates that know how to read, they know how to write, they know how to do basic arithmetic. They're ready to enter the workplace once they graduate. That is the goal for our educational system. It isn't just pouring more money into it. It's actually producing a system that produces a product that's in the best interest of our kids. And more than... And we share the governor's goal of having a government that works for the people, for the taxpayers, for our neediest citizens, for this generation and the next generation. Now, that may be bringing our liquor system into the 21st century. That may be finding ways to take our neediest citizens and transitioning them from a life of poverty to one of self-sustainability. But we want a government that works each and every day. A government that shows up at the office and each and every day is focused on one thing. It's not just focused on creating more programs or spending more money to make its citizens more dependent upon it. We want to focus on a government that works each and every day with the singular goal of creating an atmosphere in this state where our citizens are actually financially independent from their government. This is the government we desire. This is the America of which we dream, and this is the vision. Our caucus is committed to working with our colleagues across the aisle, our colleagues in the Senate, and the governor to bring home to Pennsylvania over the next couple months. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.